In today's video, I am going to be talking to you about the difference between prep high school basketball and regular high school basketball. So the difference between prep basketball and regular high school is actually pretty massive. And I'm going to be basically breaking it down to you right here. So on the prep side, you generally are going to be playing in higher level leagues, which was basically is going to give you better exposure, but at the same time, you are going to be playing against better opponents. What this is going to do for you is it's going to help you improve faster because you're going to be playing against better opponents as long as you're getting playing time. That's a whole different story that I'm not going to get into because every school is different when it comes to playing time for players. However, what I'm going to be getting into is the complete differences between both prep and high school basketball. I have had the luxury of being able to coach both at the prep level as well as at the regular high school level, and I can see a massive difference between the two. So to start at the prep level, some of the biggest things, at least for most of the schools, and now this is coming from a Canadian perspective with Canadian prep schools, but I know a lot of coaches in the States who coach at the prep level, and they've given me a lot of information, and it's basically very similar. What you are basically going to be getting in your average day that you're going to see is going to be most likely, depending on the school, but generally between 7 and around 7:30 is the start time, and that is going to be your practice. Now, depending on the team, that could be a team practice, that could be an individual skills session, that could be a lot of different things. It could be a workout. For my experience, usually it's going to be on-court work, whether it's going to be with team or individual. However, I have heard of a lot of different prep schools that do morning practices, and that is usually some type of physical activity, not basketball. And usually that goes until the start of the school day, which is generally about 9 a.m. Now, every school is different. Some schools will start at 8:30. Some schools will start at 8:45, 9:15, 9:30. It doesn't matter. Generally, around 9 a.m. is when your actual school starts. Now, that generally goes roughly until between 2:30 and 3:30, depending on the school. And let's just say 3 p.m. is when school finishes. That is when another practice happens. Now, again, this could be a team practice, this could be a skills session, this could be a lot of different things. This could be half of this time that's coming up after school could be a workout session, or the school may also do the workout session during your phys ed class. So there is that aspect as well, which gives a couple of schools that do that a little bit more flexibility and gives you more basketball time on the court. And when that comes down to it, usually that goes until about 5 p.m., maybe 6 p.m. It depends on the school yet again. But generally speaking, you are going to school and you are going to be at school sometime around 7 a.m. and you're going to be leaving sometime around 6 p.m. Now, this is when you start learning about basketball greatly. You're going to be learning, hey, I am preparing for university basketball, which generally means at the university level, you are going to be doing somewhere in the range of between 20 and 30 hours of basketball per week. And depending on the school and depending on the leagues that your school is in, for example, if you are an NCAA university school versus, let's say, U Sports in Canada, you are only going to have about 20 hours of coached time, which includes games, per week. Now, if you want to go over and above, you can get a shooting machine from your school. Most schools have them, and you can get some shots up. You can just get on the court and work on your skills. You can bring an outside trainer in, usually depending on the school. You can bring an outside trainer in and he can work with you, but you only have 20 hours with your actual coaches in most cases. And if that's the case, well, guess what? You're only going to be doing about 5 hours per day, roughly, during the week with your coach. Now, that may seem like a lot, but you still need to do more when you're at the university level. Your goal is to play pro after university in most cases. So when you're in high school, most high school students are not thinking like that. They're thinking, oh, I got like 2 hours of practice with my rep team, my AAU team, whatever. I got maybe an hour of practice at school. I got lots of basketball. But in reality, players who go to prep school are going to be preparing for university. That's why it's called prep school, which means that you are going to get way more basketball, and you need to learn time management skills, because we have to remember there's still homework involved in school. It's a regular school, and you're just doing a ton of basketball on the side with that school. So after 6 p.m., your goal is to now work on all of your homework. You may have an hour's worth of homework. You may have 2 hours worth of homework, which then obviously you need to travel home. Let's call that 6 p.m. You now are going to be working until 9 p.m. Then you go to sleep and you wake up again to get to school at 7 a.m. If this seems like too much work for you, you are not built to be a professional basketball player. It's just how it is. I'm not trying to sugarcoat things here. If you are not willing to work this hard, you are not willing to go to the NBA, because that's what it takes. So that is going to be the bonuses of a prep school, but also the downfall of a prep school if you are not one of those players who feels like working this hard. Now, let's look at the actual regular high school. Now, I've been a regular high school coach. I've been that for many, many years, and I've worked many different years where some years you get more dedicated players, other years you don't. And what I would always try to do with my team is to do a 7:30, because that's when our doors opened, 7:30 a.m. practice, and it would go until about 8:50. And the reason being is because our school would start at 9:05, and the kids were needing 15 minutes to get to class. So we only had about an hour and 20 minutes in the morning. And I would try, with the more dedicated teams, I would try to do that 4 times a week, Monday to Thursday, because badminton had the court on Friday. And I wanted to have every evening after school, so after school, what I wanted to have was 3 to 5 p.m. Now, that wasn't always the case. I had to go and coach a rep team, AAU team for the Americans. I had to go coach other teams, or we just couldn't have the gym until that time. Maybe the couple of teachers who would be assisting were unable to make it that long, or I couldn't make it that long, whatever. But usually, I would say on average, our practices actually ended at around 4:30 on average, maybe 4, let's just call it 4:15 on average. So that's altogether, you're looking at around roughly, I would say maybe 2.5 hours of basketball per day. But that is my schedule that I did with my school, where we tried to build a team for 3 years and win a championship. Now, that's 2.5 hours per day. But an average high school, not what I tried to do. I tried to run it like a prep team. But an average high school, they're going to be practicing around 3 times per week, whether it's in the morning or afternoon, which means that you are going to be practicing maybe 5 hours per week. We were doing 2.5 hours per day. So what we were doing in 2 days, you were doing in like an entire week, and we still had 3 other days of training over top of everybody else. That's why we generally were better than some of the other small school teams. My school was super small. We only had 700 students versus other schools in our district that have 2,000 plus. So we were a small school, and we were able to compete with those other schools because of our practice schedule. Now, 2.5 hours per day is a lot versus an average of maybe an hour, maybe 45 minutes average because you're not practicing every day, versus a prep school where you're getting 5 hours of practice a day. It's crazy, right? You're getting tons of practice. It's insane. What a prep school does in one day, an average high school is doing in a week. And that's not even including the fact that most of our high school basketball seasons, depending on your state and country or whatever in Canada, it's only about 2 months of a season. Not your entire 8 months in school or whatever it may be, 9 months in school. It's not the whole entire 9 months, which means that you're getting way more practice, way more court time in an actual prep school. So that is just the basketball side alone. That's not the academic side. So when it comes to the academics, yes, you can make fun of my writing, it's fine. But on the academic side, there is a huge difference. On the prep side, you are generally on most teams needing an 80% average to play. The reason being is because when you look at, let's say, universities, it's really hard to break through to the majority of universities if you don't have an 80% average across the board. You need at least an 83 generally to break into most schools. But that's still leaving out the top, I think it's 17 or 18% of schools you're still missing out on. You can't go to them. You need to have higher than 80%. So most prep schools will say, if you're not getting 80%, you can't go to probably a good portion of universities, which we strive. We make more money if you go to a university, because now if we can push more and more players to go Division 1, we can say, look how good we are, and we can then charge more money, which means that if you're failing, you're not just failing yourself, you're not just failing us, you're failing a lot of things. You're failing the fact that you won't be playing university basketball. You're failing the fact that you're now costing us money. You're now costing us a reputation. There's a lot of things on the line, and it's not just affecting you, it's affecting others. But the biggest thing, what I would say, is it's affecting you, because if you're not getting 80%, your future prospects, your future possibilities, those doors are closing like crazy. So you need at least 80%, preferably over 90%, because if you're over 90%, especially if you're Canadian, now every university wants you. If you're a slightly good basketball player, they'll take, let's say you got two of the equal same player, and you're both averaging 20 points, you're both averaging 10 rebounds, you're both averaging 10 assists, you're both great players, you both have great personalities, every blah, 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 blah. You're the exact same mirror of each other. But one has 83% and the other one has 91%. The Canadian university is going to take the 91% player because you are now a Canadian all Canadian academic player, which means they are now allowed to, because they need at least one, to be able to give out scholarships. If they don't have one, they can't give out scholarships, which means that they need at least one because they want to give out scholarships because they can get better players. So if, let's say they recruit a whole bunch of guys who are failures or guys who not getting over 90%, guess what? You are no longer on their board. They need at least one. So you could be an average Joe Blow off the street. If you're getting over 90% and they got no other recruits that are getting over 90%, you're getting on the team just because they need somebody over 90%. It's just how it is. So get good grades. It opens up a lot of doors. With most high school teams, there is a minimum. I like to try and bench players if they were under 60%. Didn't always happen because a lot of the times a lot of my players were under 60, but I shouldn't say that, but there were some players who were under 60%, and I did bench them. I'm not going to lie. There was one player who I needed on the court drastically, badly, I needed him on the court. He was a massively good player for me, and he got a grade back that was 5%, and I said, yeah, you're on the bench. You're not going to play. I care about you too much to say that you can play with 5%. I need you not just to get better grades. I think that you have a potential to play D1 university, even though it's really hard to do that from a regular high school in Canada. I felt like this player had something special, and you need to get better grades. So I'm going to bench you just because I care about you. And I know a lot of players will look at that and say, oh man, coach, he's benching me, he hates me. But in reality, if the coach is benching you because of a bad grade, even if they're the coach's minimum, and I've heard this from a lot of players, they got a couple of marks back that were like 68%, maybe 67%, but they were in the 60s, and their school had a rule where if you were under 60, they wouldn't play you. But the coach benched them for getting into the 60s, even though it didn't break that 60% threshold that they had. He benched them because he cared about them. He wanted to prove to them that they can do better, they have to do better, which they did. But sometimes it's just coaches who care about you why they bench you. You have to try and figure this stuff out too. But that's the minimum for a lot of prep schools and high schools. Next is these schools will want you to be able to take certain programs. So they have, for example, prep schools, they have what I like to call is the Playbook. Now I'm writing with my finger because my pen is not charged up, but the Playbook versus NA. I'm gonna call it NA, which means that, for example, you need to take certain courses at certain levels to be able to be eligible to make the NCAA. There is a clearinghouse. If you do not have the right classes, if you do not have the right grades for the classes, you are not eligible to play NCAA. Prep schools know exactly what is needed for you to be able to play at that level, while a regular high school, in most cases, will probably not. If you're coming from New York and you're inner city New York, there's probably a school all over the place that knows how to get you to the NCAA. But if you are in the middle of nowhere, let's say you're in Iowa, in some farm country, or some farm state, or some farm city, or wherever you are at, and they have never had a player who has gone past high school, and you're trying to do that, they probably don't have the resources or knowledge to be able to get you to that level. So at that point, you would have to go to guidance counselors. They may not know. They might need to do some research. Hopefully they care enough that they will do enough research for you to know what courses you need to take. But for example, here in Canada, you need to go to a certain high school to be able to get American history. You need American history, at least from when I was a kid, to be able to make the clearinghouse. So you need to take that. You need to be able to hit certain subjects for it to be able to allow you, for them to be allowing you to get through the clearinghouse to be able to play NCAA basketball. So these are the biggest things that I would look at. You need to strive to become great, and that's what prep schools do for you. Now, this is not a sales pitch on prep schools, but I just wanted to make this video. I wanted to explain the differences. There is a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of players who are misdirected towards high schools, and so that they can play on certain teams, versus a prep school that may be giving them a scholarship or whatever, and they're just declining the prep schools because they want to go with friends, they want to go with a certain coach or whatever. But if your goal is to go to NCAA, a prep school, if you can afford it or if you can get a scholarship, is usually the better route to be able to go. I hope that this video has helped. If it has, hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys again in my next video.